They just set it up to Cohen, looking for some blockers. Tariq Cohen. Now he's going to throw it backwards. Ball is dropped. Coming up to get it's Trubisky, making moves, still on his feet. This play is still going. Horsted's got it. Ball is loose on the ground, and it is going to be it. Ball game. The Bears made it interesting, but the Packers will hang on and win it here at Lambeau.
Whether you're looking for a Chevy car, truck, or SUV, go see my friends at Apple Chevy in Tinley Park. With over 500 new and used vehicles in stock, they have what you're looking for, and at the lowest price possible. Go to applechevy.com. I see what you're doing there. Oh, man. The Chicago Bears season is coming to an end. In terms of playoff hopes, there's still 2 games left. One, they're going to be absolutely creamed in against the Kansas City Chiefs. I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But one that I still have some interest in, I think most Bears fans do, which is against the Minnesota Vikings. That's a pretty good rivalry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since the year
Minnesota Vikings.
1960.
Well, I'm doing Lizzo.
It's the best part of that song.
The only part of that song. Obi Obradovich, Ed Obradovich is joining us right now. Thank you so much for being here. As always, we appreciate your time.
Good evening.
All right. So when we last spoke, we were talking about the need for the Bears to show up in Green Bay no matter what. It was the whole season, and it's also, the best rivalry in football. It's the most, and it was a fairly intense game. I mean, it wasn't like either team really gave up. The Bears just weren't as good at the end of 60 minutes of play. And what advice would you have for the organization now as they move forward so that they turn this team that seems like it's on the brink into a real playoff team?
Well, when you talk about last year and coming into this year, all the high expectations, I mean, everybody was believing, hoping that, hey, guess what? It's been 34 years. I think this team can do it. They can take us there to the promised land. And you want to talk about a letdown. And I think, again, defensively speaking, are we as good as last year? No, we're not. Not even close, as a matter of fact. But we're still good enough to win a Super Bowl with this defense. What has happened is our offense, which I believe is in total and complete disarray. They don't know if they're going to run the ball to the strong side, the weak side. This is a vertical game. I can't tell you how many times yesterday, the week before, we must throw close to a half or darn near over a good third of horizontal passes. That's not the way it works. The field is 53 yards wide, 100 yards long, and there just happens to be 2 things at the east of the other sides of the 100 yards. They're end zones, and they're 10 yards, okay? Now, Maggie has got to figure out how to go vertical, and I'm not trying to be funny at all. This guy had game after game after game to try to go vertical, try to move Trubisky out of the pocket. I mean, I've been talking about this, Ro, and I have, all year, all last year. This kid is not a pocket passer. He's an action passer. You got to move him. That's the only way you're going to win with this kid. Now, you're talking about going into next year. What has to be done? Nagy has to give up play calling. He has to bring somebody in. If there's somebody on the staff he thinks is qualified, fine. But I'll tell you what, if not, he's got to step away. He's got to stop coddling that quarterback, grabbing him every time he comes off the field, hugging him, grabbing him, hugging him, talking in his ear. That's got to stop, bro. My God, the kid's 25 years old. He's been here 3 years. It's enough already. The kid knows how to play the position.
Okay, so
the problem is he good enough? And right now, Mitch Trubisky is not good enough to take us to the Super Bowl, period.
Don't you think he had a better game yesterday, though, than you've seen almost all season?
No. Ro?
Yeah.
Were we watching the same game?
Yeah.
I'll tell you something. We have played the Green Bay Packers twice this year. Do you know how many touchdowns we've scored against them?
That'd be one.
Yeah.
One touchdown, and you know when that win? That was in the 8th quarter of 2 games. We finally scored a touchdown. You don't think we have a problem?
Oh, we do. I don't doubt that. What I'm talking about, though, is he seemed more confident. He was moving, to your point, he was able to move laterally. He was actually to move vertically too. He got up the field a number of times. I think they were worried about him doing that after his injury, and they really can't. I mean, he's just that kind of a quarterback. You're going to have to put him in harm's way. He's not Tom Brady. Right? You're not going to put all these monsters around him. The offensive line, ever since Kyle Long was lost to the team, and now he'll be gone from the team, would be my assumption. They're going to have to beef up that offensive line. You're 100% right, 1,000% right, 10 million% right that Matt Nagy has to give up the play calling. They got to find a guy, and the defensive scheme is not particularly great here either. And that's one of the reasons that we're talking about the fact that Khalil Mack, one of the greatest defensive weapons of this century, which I will remind you is 1/5 of the way through. Don't anybody freak out yet. There's no excuse for why that guy can't be, the most dominant defensive player. He's certainly built like it. He certainly has the skills and he's got the mind for it. But they're just not creating a scheme to get him open, to get to the passer.
Well, Ro, I take a little issue with that. There's another fella on that team. His name is Akeem Hicks. And if you want to talk about the dominant player is Akeem Hicks.
Yeah, at the moment, yes.
And that guy, when he's in there, he destroys things. And by the way, I hope the Bears, these last 2 games, take him and just deactivate him.
Yeah. Don't
let him go out there because he'll give everything he has, and I don't want him to see him break that arm or rip that arm apart, for no reason whatsoever. But when he's out of there, what does Khalil Mack do? Let me tell you something, Ro. Khalil Mack makes $141 million for a 6-year contract. Now, if you extrapolate that out, okay, and let's say he plays 50 plays a game. And I mentioned 2 years before, but I mean, it's unbelievable. Why? Because he's been invisible the last 6, 7, 8 games. All right? Every play, if it's 50 plays a game that he plays, every play he makes $30,000. That kid better walk on water.
That's an excellent point.
Well, that's how I started the show, OB, it's obviously a very disappointing. I mean, this is a game when we were looking at the schedule, we say, hey, maybe that could be a Super Bowl preview. Chiefs are in town, Bears could be good, but here we are. I did start with Akeem Hicks talk because that guy's a warrior, OB. I mean, he could barely lift his left arm, and he's still, as you said, creating destruction in the middle of the line.
He's all-time now. He's all-time Bears now.
I respect. I mean, he was out there playing with, you could tell, the first series he's not even moving his left arm, and he's still blowing things up.
There's a kid that could have played in the 60s, could have played on the 85 Bears team. I mean, I tell you, he's a terrific player. He's got a phenomenal attitude. And boy, when I saw him, the pain that he was in the position where his arm was in, when he got it hurt the first time, I thought, that's it. He's not coming back in. I'll be damned. He came back in, got it hurt again, went out, and came back in again. That kid is a warrior. He's a great, great player. And if I was to pick between Mack and Akeem Hicks, it's Akeem Hicks all day long. He is the man that destroys everything. Up the middle, you got to have that force up the middle, so it makes it easier for your outside rushers to go. Why? Because the quarterback can't step up. That's why.
By the way, also to the rushing problems continue. 3.6 yards a carry on the ground. It's just been a mess all season.
Well,
I can't figure it out. It's been like this all year. Same old story.
It is so disappointing, and we struggle. The whole thing last year, even though we were 12-4, you know what? We struggled last year, Kevin, to score touchdowns. Go back and take a look, and you'll see. We score a touchdown a game, maybe 2 touchdowns. There might be in the fourth quarter. You know, how many close games? Look at what's happened this year. We played, the last 5 games, we played the Lions twice. In 14 games, they've won. Already this year, they've only won 3 games. We played the New York Giants. They've won 2 games. We played the Dallas Cowboys. When they came in here, they were 6-6. And all of a sudden, the Bears have found the promised land. Everything is great. Everything's wonderful. Well, guess what? They went up into Lambeau, and they should have feasted on the Packers. This, again, are the games that you live for. Believe me when I tell you that. This is who you want to play in that particular situation.
Yeah.
We go up there, and we score a touchdown in the fourth quarter of that football
I
game.
get it. Yes, I know. OB, thank you. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week after an absolute slaughter is what we're going to be dealing with next week. There he goes, Ed Obradovich. We got the news coming your way in 2 minutes from Northwestern Medicine
Those we
Newsroom.
get to the newsroom first. Steve Rosanek standing by. He clearly has news on his mind. He'll have to share it with you now because that's his job. And it starts right about here. Be honest. Raise your hand if you thought the Bears would win yesterday.
I did.
So did I.
Yeah.
I really did.
They've been playing well. Better.
Well, let's get to the guy, and the guy is the Hamp, sponsored by ChevyDriveChicago.com. Hamp, listen, I believe this is one of the most depressing Bears seasons we've had because of the expectations we had. Am I overstating that?
No, and good morning. You're exactly right. Pain is inevitable, but the suffering, even that is not an option now. It is what it is. The Bears are 7-7, and assured of being out of the playoffs. So that one moment in time of a year ago has now all but evaporated. But more importantly, going into the pregame yesterday with the great Ed Obradovich, I said, look, I'm halfway tempted to kind of be optimistic and throw bouquets and say, oh, wow, the Bears have won 3 in a row, 4 or 5. The offense actually looked effective and efficient last week against the Cowboys. And then on the other hand, I'm just so mad that this 100th season was basically desecrated by a team that not only started the season out unprepared, but they never seemed to, what would you say, acknowledge it?
Right.
Or take ownership of it. But here we are, going into a meaningless couple of last games of the year, and they're still saying, "Oh yeah, well we're doing this and we're doing that," and and at some point we all just shake our head and say, "Dudes, you had opportunities to make something happen this year, and you didn't do it, and shame on you." And think about this: the Packers, the arch rival of arch rivals. It's the oldest rivalry in pro football. And we had the ball 25 times in 2 games, 120 minutes of football, and we score, that's right, 1 touchdown. So it's, it's not good. And I, for one, would like for some of them just to step back and say, hey, you're right, we stink, and we need to take ownership.
I think the really discouraging part of it is that you look at the fourth quarter of the game, and after the Bears cut it to 8 points, they still have half the fourth quarter remaining, and the defense gives them multiple opportunities, multiple possessions there. Even after a sudden change situation with the interception, they don't let the Packers capitalize on it, and they still can't get the ball in there. Although I know they almost did on the last play, but still, they had every opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and you know what? So much of that, Mr. Cat, as you know, using a million games, it was garbage time. Green Bay kind of checked it into neutral somewhere late part of the third quarter. They had a 21-3 lead, and they essentially started, hey, let's get ready for the Vikings mode. And okay, to the Bears' credit, they scored their only touchdown of the day and kind of got back in it and was threatening and was making noises and huffing and puffing, but nothing ever came out of it. And think about this. The last 3 quarters of the game, the Packers essentially played a dime defense. That's 6 defensive backs, where most anyone in the game of football would say, hey, this is where you strap your helmet on and you run at them, and you just make them pay for the fact that they've got a bunch of little guys on the field. Let's mug them. Well, we couldn't do that. We've got such, trouble with, the offensive line, a group of tight ends that are not only ineffective but invisible. And at some point, you just got to say, Trubisky was able to generate a bunch of, meaningless yards, but the 2 interceptions came at back-breaking moments. And somehow, some way, this team, they were ill-prepared in September, and that's exactly what happens when you get into a game like this, that you've got to be able to make things happen. We could never do it. And hey, here we are, 7-7, and looking up at the Vikes and the Packers playing for the division crown in the week.
Everybody else gets to have fun. Back with Dan Hampton, sponsored by Chevy Drive Chicago.com. All right, Hamp, what have we learned?
Well, there's a couple of things, and by the way, that gentleman that was on just 60 seconds ago saying, hey, 23 years ago they did my fascia and sausage. They did a great job, and guess what? It lasted.
Nice.
Think about how last year this Bear team, 12-4, and we all thought, oh wow, we are on the cusp of something really special, and stringing together a bunch of winning seasons. You think about this: in the last 25 years, the Bears have had 2 back-to-back winning seasons. It's 25 years ago,
That's
1994,
ridiculous.
95.
That's ridiculous.
They went 9-7 and 9-7, and then in 05 and 06, we know that they were pretty good in 05, and then they went to the Super Bowl and lost in 06. But what happens is you have to be able to put building blocks in place and say we're going to be able to count on this and count on that. Hey, our secondary acted like they'd never tackled in below 32 degrees yesterday. Mukamara, Eddie Jackson, these guys, they a lot of whiffs, and guess what? It adds up and it counts against your defense. When you miss tackles in the secondary, next thing you know, people are knocking on the goal line and scoring. And then the offensive line has been almost completely useless in run blocking. They don't open holes, which reduces your running back, Montgomery, to dodging people in the backfield. So, again, we never really had a foundation for a team to be successful. And here in Week 14, boom, you see it in living color.
Hamp, what do you make of, and I presume you've seen or heard the comments from Trubisky after the game about they could have helped the offensive line out more, moving the pocket where they've had some success. What do you think of that?
There's no denying the fact that if you was to rate, his abilities and skills, that he fares the best when he is being able to throw in the realm. He's trying to throw one back across the field yesterday to Robinson. That was good stuff. Hey, you're a professional quarterback. You're supposed to make that throw, but he did. And those are the type of plays that not only embolden your teammates and your offense, but the defense is back in the huddle going, "Oh my God, he made that play. We didn't know he could." Well, those are the things that this offense needs to feature. Unfortunately, we don't do it. It's almost like it's a contrivance when he does get out of the pocket and he's kind of being chased out by pressure. And it's a completely different thing. If you were to go back and look at the Vikings, who have played pretty well this year, and Kirk Cousins, who I'm no fan of, but after we beat their pants off here back in September, he basically said, we need to go back to doing things that I can do, which is play action, and especially play action off a bootleg. They've had about 20 touchdown bombs this year off of that one single play. The same thing that Trubisky would be very good at, and yet we very seldom, if ever, even try it. So to me, it's maddening. And okay, are we going to blame Trubisky? Or are we going to blame Nagy? Well, it's easy to. Why don't we just blame both? Because neither one has been able to come up with a consistency on offense that you got to have in today's NFL.
2 other things as far as what have we learned goes. One goes back to the original rant from late summer. Will this change things when it comes to the strategy of training camp? Because if you didn't learn that this team, and I believe all teams, but this team needs preparation, needs to practice, needs contact, needs to hit to be ready for game 1, I don't know if you'd ever learn it if you didn't learn it this year.
Let's hope. Yeah, and again, Matt Nagy's not going to get fired. Ryan Pace is going to embrace Nagy and Trubisky like they're the baby Jesus over this offseason. Because if they fail, he fails. So get ready for it. But essentially, those two guys, all three of them, they need to have a come to Jesus moment and say, hey, what we're doing, it's not working. We've got to be better. We've got to be smarter. We've got to be more pragmatic. But you're exactly right. The refusal to act like a professional coach and say, we need the preseason because guess what? We've got an offensive right guard that played defense 2 years ago at Nobody University, and he doesn't know how to play yet, and so we need to run block. We need to make sure that Cody Whitehair is going to be able to play left guard and Daniels is going to be the center. But wait a minute. It didn't work out, so we had to change in the middle of this. All these things could have been settled and decided way back when in August if they had their hats on correct. But you know what? Ego and, this hubris that they carried into the season has really, it's been a shame to watch it all be squandered. And now, hey, we get to watch Patrick Mahomes Sunday night and say, wow, what would have been possible if only we would have drafted him.
So, last thing from me, and Dave, jump in after if you got a quickie, but you got to bring in competition in camp against Trubisky, don't you?
They won't. They're going to say they will, and they may bring in somebody, a Ryan Tannehill type of suspect, a Fitzpatrick or somebody that, they get off the waiver wire. Obviously, Chase Daniel is not the guy that pushes Trubisky. He knows just his pecking order. He's not a guy that would do it or threaten Trubisky. But all I know is this. We saw a definitive improvement in not only Trubisky, but his habits and his preparation after what happened. After he got his butt benched for playing bad in the L.A. Ram game. They're not going to admit it, but you know and I know, we know what we saw, that he came back and he played better. Competition is good for everybody. You see it every day on the golf course. I see it every day when I played. Every day we had to earn our earn our spot, earn our mojo. And you know what? The sooner they realize that 10 years from now or 100 years from now, it's all going to be the same because it is a competitive sport. The sooner you make this kid earn his starting job instead of giving it to him, we're all going to be a lot better.
And we're going to have a couple of weeks here, unfortunately, to look ahead to next year. But is there one guy that you look at this year and you say, okay, and maybe a new element to this team that you can say, hey, next year, here's a guy who will be an important part of this who wasn't going into 2019?
Well, the two young tight ends, they offer possibilities. Horsted is a wide receiver. He's only 220 pounds. He's got to get bigger. Bigger, stronger is always better. But, he's got some skills, some abilities. On defense, Nick Kwiatkowski earned the right to be a starter, not only in the NFL, but here in Chicago. Let's hope they do the right thing and keep him here. By the way, while Khalil Mack was collecting his, I think it's $33,000 a play yesterday up in Green Bay, at least Akeem Hicks came back,
wow.
And he didn't have to off of an injured elbow, but he came back. And he played, and he had an impact.
Impressive.
And you know what? Even though a couple of times he had to leave, you got to tip your cap to his grit and his determination. He is so important to this team. If everybody would watch and see how he tries to win for the Chicago Bears, boy, we're going to be that much closer to getting back where we need to be.
It's Dan Hampton. The Bears didn't make the playoffs, but he did because he was really, really good. And he's still really, really good. And he'll be on with us for the playoffs. Huh? See what I did there?
Yeah, I see that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Almost.
Got pretty close, Charles.
It certainly did. And Tariq Cohen was especially upset at the end of this play because I think he wanted Jesper Horsted to find someone to pitch it to. Horsted trying to make a play, doesn't find anyone else to lateral, and in his defense, he's being dragged down to the ground.
You know what's the worst part about today? You know what's the worst part about it? It's not the fact that the Bears lost. They do plenty of that. It's not the fact that they lost to the Packers. Because in my lifetime, they most certainly do plenty of that. They're very adept, very skilled at doing so. It's not the fact that the Bears ultimately got swept by the Green Bay Packers in 2019. Because again, this organization is very adept at doing just that. It's not the fact that where I wanted to come on here after today's game and bash on the cheeseheads and talk about how overrated they are, that they're a fraud, even though a lot of us know deep down that's true, I don't get to do that. Haven't earned the right to do that. The worst part about today is not the ultimate realization that whatever fleeting hope there was is gone and the Bears aren't going to make the playoffs. Because again, let's be realistic. Including this year, in the past 30 seasons, the Bears have made the playoffs 8 times. 8. Not even 30% of the time. So again, I am more than definitely used to that. The worst part about today was not seeing the offense stink up the joint for basically the first half. Again, I'm used to that. Seeing the former number 2 overall pick quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky, make a couple of good plays and plenty of more crappy throws. Throws at receivers' feet that would make Cade McNown proud. That wasn't the worst part. Because ultimately, knowing that the Bears drafted him, you just had to know deep down inside that he ultimately was going to prove that he's not the guy. And the realization that he's not the guy should have come to all of you a long time ago. And if you're holding on to this hope, stop! Being naive and dumb is no way to get through life, especially as a Bears fan. Or hell, maybe it is. Who the frick knows at this point? Is the worst part of today's loss the fact that this so-called alleged elite defense that knows that they need to be big in this all-important game gives up 21 points early where the team falls way damn behind? No. That's not even the worst part of it. The worst part of it is it's just all emblematic of the mediocrity of the Midway. I mean, what more can you say? You're going to have those idiots that look at the numbers and say, oh, Trubisky threw for over 300 yards. That didn't mean crap in this game. Because a lot of that came when the team was already down 21-3. Because he played like tits in the first half. The running game that can't get on track because Nagy refuses to try and get it on track. Hey, here's a dive play with the 5'6" running back Tariq Cohen. Another game with less than 15 carries for David Montgomery. Another game with less than 50 yards rushing for David Montgomery. Another game where the offensive line struggled to open up any type of consistent running lanes. Another game where it felt like far too many times the shell-shocked young quarterback was under duress and pressure because his offensive line not only can't run block, they can't pass block either. And don't let any of these analytics nerds or anybody else tell you anything differently. It's not the fact that these corners for the Bears are sitting there playing 10 yards off the receivers because how well that worked out this year, it hasn't. So stop doing it and instead success. It's a fact that this damn team has players like Amuka Murray like, no, I'm good. I'm making business decisions. I'm not going to try and tackle Aaron Jones. It's not like this is a game with the freaking season on the line. It's not like you expect the guy that you gave up 2 first-round picks for to actually bother to show the hell up in this game. And I don't want to hear the scheming excuses, the double-teaming excuses. The bottom line is he's supposed to be the alpha dog. He ain't the alpha dog. Where the hell has he been most of this year? It's just another year And another wasted one at that. And what makes this even worse is for once, I actually bought into the BS. I actually believed in this team, in this mediocre midway organization, and that's what the hell I deserve. I softened my tone. I tried to roll with the punches. I avoided saying sometimes what was really truly all in my mind, because God knows when it comes to the numbskulls that are in the Bears media, the Bears fan base, you need a voice like mine whether you like it or not. Stupid. And the refs aren't helping. Cordero Patterson makes a phenomenal play on punt coverage, and they call a freaking penalty on him for that. And I don't even want to bring it up really. I don't even know why I just did. Because in the grand scheme of things, did it really make any difference? Absolutely not. Because this alleged fraud of an elite Bears defense has been anything but elite this year, no matter what these idiots try to tell you. Oh, they've had injuries. Elite units figure out a way to get it done, and they figure out a way to step up and nut up and man up when their team needs them the most. Monsters of the Midway, my white pasty ass. And it's offense. You see the idiots on Twitter. Oh my God, Trubisky's going to do some good today. You know you go with them again next year. Nobody figures it out. How many more years do you need? Mahomes last year's first full year as a starter. Threw for over 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, team made the NFC Championship game, went to overtime, should have beaten the Patriots, and he was the league's MVP. This year, Lamar Jackson, his first full season as a starter, second year in the league. He's been dynamic, phenomenal. The Ravens are the top team in the AFC, and he's going to win the MVP. Deshaun Watson's in year 3. Here's the dude in Houston. They win in spite of Bill O'Brien, the head coach, and in spite of Bill O'Brien, the general manager. But you want to talk to me about patience with Trubisky? I take it back. The worst thing of all is seeing a lot of you come up with pathetic excuses to defend the mediocrity of the McCaskey family, the mediocrity of this Bears organization. This is not how it should be. This is not how it's supposed to be. When you have to do so much to try and justify things, that tells you all you need to know. If you have to go this far to excuse Nagy, he ain't that dude. If you have to go this far, Ryan Pace, what the hell are you going to give him a 6th year for? He's already had 5, and they got 1 playoff appearance out of it. Give me a break. Jerry Angelo was better. Oh, Trubisky in year 4. How many more years do you need to see the dude to know that he sucks? It took you 6 with Grossman, 8 with Cutler, and even in the case of Cutler, some of you are still delusional enough to think he was pretty good. Being embedded with this Bears fan stupidity, this Bear fan's acceptance of mediocrity, is the worst thing about being a Bears fan. And it is the worst thing about this season, because instead of holding this organization's tits to the ringer like they deserve to, everybody's going to be pathetically pandering and say, well, it's not that bad. They're on the right track. And come next year, they'll be back. The hell you say?